Good afternoon. I'm Diane Dungy, Senior Deputy Managing Editor and a representative of the Daily Herald editorial board. Today is Thursday, September 10th, and we're pleased to begin a joint interview with candidates for the 9th Congressional District in the November 3rd election. I'm joined by reporter Steve Zalewski and editorial board members Jim Slusher and Lisa Miner. We welcome the candidates, incumbent Jan Schakowsky and her Republican opponent, Mr. Sargis Sangari. We have 1 hour, and I ask that you keep your responses concise. Representative Schakowsky, we'll begin our questioning with you.
Sure.
Many say this election is a referendum on the president. Is it? And if so, what rating would you give to President Trump? Representative Schakowsky, where do you agree with him? And Mr. Sangari, where do you disagree with him?
I think this is in many ways a referendum on the President of the United States, who, in my view, there isn't really a letter low enough, maybe an F minus, if there is such a thing, of his performance. I mean, you can look at really any aspect. I was telling you, Diane, before we began, that we are getting desperate calls from constituents all throughout the 9th Congressional District who are suffering because this administration has managed the coronavirus so poorly, and that it has destroyed the economy, and people are calling because they have no source of income right now. They've run out of their unemployment insurance. There are people waiting in food lines. There are people who can't get the health care they need because they lost their health insurance. And there are municipalities that are calling because they need help. They need some of the state and local money that the Democrats have passed. But Donald Trump and his disgusting language in terms of veterans right now, finding out that he actually knew about the depth of the pandemic and did absolutely nothing about it. He likes to play it down, he said. And I think that we have never seen the United States in such a desperate situation as we are now, largely at the hand of the President of the United States. Now, it's not hard to agree with a lot of things that he says, but they never really happen. You know, he talks about he wants to lower prescription drug prices. In fact, they've gone up because he's done absolutely nothing about that. He says that he supports working class families, and there's no bigger betrayal than that he has shown as a preference for the wealthiest Americans in terms of his probably the most famous of his achievements, which was a $2 trillion tax cut, 83% of which went to the top 1%. So in every respect, I would say that this presidency has been a failure and has put the United States of America into a position that we've never been before, which is a lack of respect from countries, allies around the world.
Thank you. Mr. Sangari, before I go to you, I should mention that a member of your campaign has joined us on the screen here, and that we have asked that campaign staff members remain off video and remain silent for this. And Mr. Sangari, if you could answer the same question, I'd appreciate it.
Well, look, I think we had this similar discussion last time in another endorsement session, and I will tell you, Congresswoman, as somebody who's a constituent in your district, focus on your race, focus on your district. Vice President Biden is running against President Trump. That question should be for them. And 3 November, people of the United States are going to either vote President Trump in the office, or they're going to elect a new president. That's it. So as far as my particular district is concerned, what I'm focused on is really what is significant to our people here, which has been driving as far as the healthcare issues are concerned. And the current Congresswoman is still in Congress. She could try to address some of the fixes as far as the Affordable Care Act is concerned. She has that opportunity until she's no longer congressperson come 3 November. And the other pieces are the economic development that we need to push specifically in our district to bring businesses that were overseas in China back here so we can control our manufacturing base. And I would highly encourage, as we are working on those issues, to understand that the domestic tranquility needs to be restored to our city and streets, because that is an issue that the voters in my district have constantly talked about. So I'm focused really on my own district. When you're running against an incumbent who's got $2.6 million in their coffers, another $5.6 million could be put in their coffers. If they whistled, $10 million will be put in their coffers just so they could stay in power for 2 more years. It's really difficult. So you have to try your best to go out there, to do the best you can. Just be known to run a race rather than paying attention on something I cannot reach out and touch, which is a presidential election.
Mr. Sangari, this question, if you would begin, please. As a follow-up, where do you disagree with President Trump, if any?
That's a very generic question. You got to be specific on foreign policy, economics, lay something out that you want me to disagree upon. So that given, you have to be specific more about that particular question, because he's brought economic opportunity back. Is even bringing peace in the Middle East after 50 years of dialogue that didn't work. Everything that he's done economically has put us in a positive position. We're trying to get some of manufacturing back again, which Congresswoman, you could have done that before he was even elected into office.
I'm sorry to interrupt. If I could rephrase it then, are there areas where you disagree with President Trump, and if so, what would they be?
I would say what I would probably try to reinforce more with him is possibly to ensuring that we get the economic, our economic manufacturing base back from China sooner than before. I think one of the problems we may run into is the issue that we're dealing in Southeast Asia, and I've written white papers on this for the National Security Council. Just today, you saw that the economists came out and talked about the Burmese genocide, and 2 army officials that had left the Burmese military did point out to what I had written going back to basically years ago, which I had given a piece of paper to the National Security Council on that particular specific issue. I think we need to start holding China more responsible, especially their companies, for what they are doing when it comes to human rights violations. So in that aspect, I would be a little bit harder on China than the current president is.
Thank you. And Representative Schakowsky, if I could ask a similar question of you. In what areas, if any, do you disagree with your party's nominee, Vice President Biden?
Well, I have made healthcare a pivotal issue for me. That's the reason, really, I wanted to go to college, to Congress, knowing that I believe that every American, every person in the United States should have the right, not the privilege, the right to health care, affordable, accessible health care. For many, many decades, I have supported a single-payer system, Medicare for all, essentially. But I played a very pivotal role, as my opponent said, in the development of the Affordable Care Act. Because I have been on that committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee, who does healthcare for a long time. I would go further than I've heard our presidential candidate go. Joe Biden is in favor of creating a public option. I agree with that, and I am on every single health care improvement bill that has been introduced, including healthcare, Medicare for all, but also a public option. So I see this on the path to universal health care, to allow people to choose a Medicare-like option when they go onto the exchange. And I think that would be an anchor that would pull down healthcare costs. And I think it's a choice that I think most Americans probably would pick. So I look forward to working with the Biden administration, which I'm very close to, the campaign and then the administration, to make sure that healthcare, which has been revealed through this pandemic to have so many inequities, so many people who aren't able to get the healthcare that they need, to make sure that they can, and to work with them to move toward the goal of healthcare for everyone as a right and not a privilege in the United States.
Thank you. Mr. Sangari, would you define for us your view on healthcare and specifically on the Affordable Care Act?
Well, healthcare is priority to everybody. It's priority to all of us sitting here, everybody in the country, and especially our families. So look, I don't understand how you could pass a bill and then turn around and be critical of your own bill. That makes no sense. That's why I think Washington sometimes needs to stop talking and actually create the ideas that are there to fix the problem to begin with. I was never a fan of the ACA. I thought it was just large government. I don't think it was well thought out. From an individual who has applied the problem-solving technique from the military perspective for 20 years to operation was absolutely a joke. We used it as a means of how not to make decisions when it came to policy, as a learning lesson for us in the military. But with that said, the constituents of my district like it. They like it because they either on the top end, which means they could throw money at it and it won't cause any issues, or into the lower end, which means that they don't have to get into the middle class, and that means the costs are going to be low for them. But it still didn't solve the issue of making sure that individuals who were supposedly not getting health care provided to them, that they should have access to it. Everybody did have access. If you needed to, you could have gone to the emergency room, be taken care of. Because the constituents of my district are for it, now I'm going to do what I can to keep what works and the parts that don't work. I am not going to recreate a new system. And I never understand how Congress always puts something out there, then goes against what they already put out there, that they sign a bill on, and they try to create something new. Fix what you got, period. Work on what you got. Keep the parts that work, get rid of the parts that don't.
Could you elaborate on the parts that work and the parts that don't? Which parts would you change and which parts would you keep?
I think you see that a lot of the stuff that sometimes are taken as pluses for the ACA are actually some of the things that the current POTUS had to do when it came down to lowering the drug prices and the executive action and executive orders that he's taken. I think what has not worked, of course, we know that when you're in that middle class, you get squeezed, right? So there's a dollar option there that needs to be taken care of. I am myself in the government healthcare. It's called the VA. I have been in it for 20 years. It takes a long time for me just to be able to get an appointment. December of a year ago, I fell on ice, and it took a year before I was able to get my own healthcare to be able to give me opportunity to get the physical therapy that I needed to heal myself. With that said, you have two options here. You could morph it into a process, which I think the president is leading towards when he gave us the veterans' ability to go outside of that government healthcare to private sector. You could look at something maybe similar to fixing some of these issues in the ACA, where you have the people who want to stay on it. Those are those lower end rungs. And if you have enough ability and capability to be able to go out to a private sector to get the doctors that you want, then you will have that option. I think that probably is something much better than for the fixes of the ACA than just trying to get rid of it and come up with a new option. So Congresswoman, when you say that we need to have a different option of the bill that you yourself and your party passed, that does not give me the warm and fuzzy as one of your constituents that you are going to be able to fix it. Especially as I say to people, if you're going to work, the current POTUS may win in 50 some days and be in office. You cannot constantly be attacking the person in office and think that in 2 years after you knock me out, that you're going to be able to pass any bills working with the other party. Start reaching across the aisle and work with everybody possible to fix these issues.
Oh, our time is short and our questions are many. So
if I could respond though to the accusation that I'm now turning against the Affordable Care Act, I see it as part of the continuum. It's one of my proudest moments having to help write and pass the Affordable Care Act that protects everyone from being without insurance because of pre-existing conditions. That is one of the most important things that we were able to achieve, helping millions and millions of Americans to assure that they were not going to lose their insurance, keeping young people on their parents' policies until they're in their mid-20s, a big achievement. A lot of help for seniors with preventive care that at no cost whatsoever. About 20 to 30 million more people who actually are insured. I think it's a great start. And so I am not at all talking against the Affordable Care Act.
Okay, moving on to a different topic.
Real closely, ma'am, if possible, if you are talking about continuum, not scrapping it, then I look forward before the November 3rd for you to present that particular continuum resolution in the ACA on the floor, which the House is controlled currently by the Democrats. So I would say you could probably do that in 2 lines if that's the case.
So moving on to a different topic, Representative Schakowsky, I believe it's your turn to start on this one. What do you consider America's role to be in world affairs, and what are we doing correctly and what are we doing wrong to fill that role?
So for most of my adult life, the United States was looked to as a beacon of democracy, a country that would lead in negotiations, that would make alliances around the world to create more peace. And I think that that has actually disappeared. I think that that in many ways the United States is looked as an outlier. For example, in getting removing itself from the environmental, the what?
Paris climate.
Yeah, of course, the Paris agreements, of pulling out of the Iran agreement to prevent Iran from having nuclear weapons, of criticizing without any consideration the World Health Organization, which may need some fixing, but certainly has been a force for bettering healthcare in the world. Most of our allies now, I think, just disregard in large part what the President of the United States has said. I don't think we have been a leader in helping to promote democracies around the world, and I think actually there's a Trump effect, that what we are seeing is more countries around the world moving toward authoritarianism, which the president clearly admires. He admires the leaders like Kim Jong-un. He admires the Russia so much, and Putin as the kind of leader that I think he wants to be. So I think that in many ways, sort of the standard that the United States has set for being such a leader in so many different ways around the world has diminished, if not disappeared, at this time with this president. And I think that's one of the reasons that Joe Biden, someone who has built coalitions around the world, is so popular right now.
Mr. Sangari, what do you think of the opinion that that the U.S. is diminished on the world stage?
Look, United States has always been kind of a peacekeeper around the world, ever since I was fighting in the military over the 20 plus years. I got to tell you, we've done a pretty good job. Testament to even my buddies who sacrificed on the battlefields of Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. So United States right now, the major hotspots are still in the Middle East. You have countries that are striking peace in the Middle East, in the region, that nobody ever imagined that would strike peace.
I'm interested in the U.S. role.
Well, that is happening because of the U.S. role. We're not engaging conflicts across the globe for whatever reason. The current POTUS has done more with striking deals on business side than he has done as far as trying to put weapons in somebody's face and saying you got to abide by what I'm telling you to do. And he's bringing the forces back. So I don't know. I can only just look at the reality on the ground, that there's actually more peace on the ground in the Middle East We're trying to bring soldiers home. That a lot of the Asian countries that were initially in the hemisphere of China have turned against China because they're not happy with what China has been doing and has done under the previous administration to them within their countries. So I will tell you, these are not complicated issues. Just take a look at what is happening on the ground, and you'll see that what the U.S. has done has been moving forward in the right direction. Now, if the current POTUS is reelected by the people and he is in for the next 4 years, I will do my best to ensure that we are able to bring more peace within the regions of the Middle East, and also be able to bring peace within the areas that we need to concentrate on, which are really Southeast Asia. But with that said, I hope, whether it be President Biden or President Trump, that whoever is the next POTUS, you got to concentrate on the issues in the country. You need to take the next 4 years and take care of America before you start looking outside of U.S. Just maintain what we have, continue on the path that there's more global peace around the world because of America's role, and start focusing internally.
Thank you. On another topic, and if you could start with this one, on COVID-19 response, was it appropriate to leave decisions and strategies such as testing, mask wearing, acquiring and distributing PPE in the hands of state and local authorities? What should Congress have done differently?
Well, I think Congress a long time ago should have made sure that our manufacturing base hadn't moved to China. So when China decides to take the necessary PPEs that we have and price them at a higher level, and maybe even stop them from coming to us, you know, the 9th Congressional District could have had all that manufacturing within its within this district. We could have had it here. I could have been talking to individuals within my district that instead of every time I went to get a signature, they were either getting on a train to go to Wisconsin or go downtown or outside of the district just to get a job or work in their job. It'd be better for us to have brought out that manufacturing here. We wouldn't be in a position where we had to rely on an enemy to be able to sustain us medically. Now, with that said, it is what it is. Look, nobody has been able to put a plan on the table that would have said that if we had taken different steps towards COVID, it would have been a different type of a virus. It's a virus. That's all it is. And we have to react depending on what the science is telling us. And based on that, we are going to try our best to ensure that as science comes along, you know, we evaluate it, whether it be from school openings to where we go from here, how many people can gather internally in a building. Should they wear a mask? Should they not wear a mask? We'll just deal with it as it happens. I think the United States is very well capable of handling these type of pandemics. We are a global leader. And I think we have learned our lesson that instead of allowing our manufacturing bases to be in the hands of others, it is better for that to be here so we can at least take care of our people faster than, you know, we have taken care of them in the past.
Thank you.
Can I ask for a little more clarity on that? I just wonder if, I mean, the question still is, everything happened as it happened, and yet state by state, we see a total patchwork of approaches. And when you consider how much travel there is from state to state and how the economy is based on all of us, is it appropriate that states were able to have so many different approaches to this, so that, or should there have been a federal approach that might have been more consistent nationwide?
Jim, there was a federal approach, and that federal approach worked. And look, I was in Korea, and Congressman, when you were thinking about impeachment, I actually went to Korea out of my own dime. On 7th of December, I was standing in Korea because we knew something's happening in China. So during that time, when I went there, we gathered information, came back, I went to Washington, gave my briefing to the folks that I have in Washington. You guys were on break. You went on vacation for your holiday. By January, we had already removed almost 1,000 members of our chief of mission out of China. So we knew something was wrong. We were taking it seriously. However, Jim, you know, we are a constitutional republic. We are not the Chinese government, where they were burning bodies in masses in Wuhan and were keeping the information from getting out, that they were not just locking down people, but they were locking them down at gunpoint. The individuals that they did not think that could survive, they were executing them. These are open source information. Everybody has written about them now. Multiple papers on both sides, right and the left. So we are a constitutional republic. We do what we can within the abilities to be able to empower those states to do what they have to do in order to protect their people. In this case, even the residents of the 9th Congressional District. That's why we have representatives for various different groups of people throughout the country. So I think that, yes, we have taken the right steps. We've done the best we can, and we've done it within the structure of our nation. And look, if you're going to get paid a lot of money as a governor, and you're going to get paid a lot of money as a healthcare expert in that civil service, then I expect you to be able to work with the federal level, take the science, look at it extremely closely, and give us the best answer you can on a virus that nobody knows how it's going to react within a year to 2 years from now.
Thank you. And Representative Schakowsky, was the federal response appropriate, and what should Congress have done differently, if anything?
The president actually said that he doesn't take responsibility. At this point, as of today, there are 196,087 people who are dead because of the virus. We are about 5% of the population, and about 25% of the cases of the COVID-19 virus. And so it seems to me obvious that we needed a federal strategy. I was working closely with the healthcare agencies in the district, in Chicago, and in the state. And there was no plan, for example, on supply chain. How are we going to get the PPE, the adequate equipment for the workers who are going into nursing homes, into hospitals, all of our frontline healthcare workers? What about the testing? We still don't have adequate testing. And Tony Fauci and those people who, the scientists that work for the government, would agree that there are so many things that the federal government should be doing to help control this virus. Instead, the president is doing the opposite, refusing to wear a mask, refusing to model any of the behavior, encouraging people to come to rallies, to come to the big events where people are close together, inside and outside, denigrating people who do things to be careful. So he is sending out the absolutely wrong signals for people and doing nothing and blaming the states, and then turning around and blaming the states for what they're doing. We don't have any national model. And as was pointed out, people cross borders, they drive in, they come from states where there are no rules about how to act. There's no history of wearing masks. This is a disaster not to have a national coordinated strategy. And what we're seeing as a result is more and more people contracting the virus, and more people dying. And I'll tell you, experts are saying that if the president would have taken different procedures and taken control over this virus, taken control as many countries, democratic countries, have taken, that there would be many people alive today that are dead because of the inaction and the incompetence of the President of the United States.
Let me ask a follow-up question then. And,
if I may, I'm sorry.
Just a second, please. And we'll come back to you, but I'd like you to answer this one first. What is your position on mask-wearing mandates, and how should K through 12 education be conducted at this moment?
On what mandates?
Mask-wearing mandates.
Mask?
mask
Oh,
wearing.
mask wearing.
Yeah.
It's simple. It is something that you do because you protect the person next to you from getting the virus. It is something that you do as a good citizen, as a good person, as someone thoughtful, that absolutely the scientists, who the president doesn't listen to, the scientists tell us that it is a very important element in addressing this crisis right now, that mask wearing is essential. And I believe that, yes, it should be mandatory as much as you can to prevent people from not wearing masks, but certainly not to encourage them to not wear masks. It's unforgivable.
And Mr. Sangari, on mask wearing and on how K through 12 education should be conducted.
Oh.
Well, science, the one you're referring to, representative, says that when you're inside, and if you cannot be 6 feet apart, wear a mask. That's
Oh,
it.
I
It
agree with
doesn't say
that.
anything about outside. It doesn't say anything else. So it doesn't say that everybody should wear a mask at all times.
No, that's right. You're right.
It doesn't matter what and okay, the science says it. If science tomorrow comes and says that the schools need to be open, they should be open. Science said it. Then you should be able to listen to what the scientists are saying. Now, with that said, every time science says something, we should look at it in detail to see if what they're saying is correct or incorrect. How is it going to affect everything else? Science doesn't exist in itself, in its own funnel. There's other system of systems that has to affect. So based on what science is saying now, if science tomorrow says that young people are not susceptible to this, if it says that, and they should go back to school, then I expect our schools to be open. So, and I expect that everybody from both sides of the aisle to support what science says, not suddenly, start bashing each other because I belong to this party and that party, because party politics is much more important than what even science is saying. And with that said, again, I go back to the whole issue. If you take our manufacturing over this year is going to be your 22nd year end, Congresswoman, and in those 20 years and put it in China, that means you put our masks in China, you put our healthcare in the Chinese hands, you put our respirators in the Chinese hands, and then suddenly we were hit by a pandemic and we don't have enough masks because you do not replenish all that stuff. Well, okay, if you want the POTUS to take a blame, then you need to be able to step up and say, I am at fault too. I'm not even in Congress, and I've stood on stage and I've said we're all to blame. I'm not even in Congress. I've never heard somebody who is in Congress ever blame themselves and say that we need to work together. All I hear is one group bashing the other group because they just want to stay in power for another couple of years. If the current POTUS wins, Congresswoman, you're going to have to work with him over the next 2 years. And if he wins and you don't work with him for the next 2 years and you knock me out of this race, you're going to sit in your seat for 2 years and not pass one bill. You need to be a moderate. You need to start working together. If you're going to say you're going to listen to science, then you got to listen to it, not just from your own political echo chamber. You need to be able to listen to it from all sides. Dialogue is what is causing us problems. As far as trying to have a federal response to what we were doing, and you want to compare it to other countries, trying to build a hospital in a week. Go build me a hospital in a week in the 9th Congressional District. Let me see if you could do it. You're not going to do it because we are a constitutional republic. We don't put people at gunpoint and say, go build me a hospital in a week. Work together, Congresswoman.
Actually, in Chicago, at McCormick Place, a hospital was built in, I don't know.
It wasn't built
very
from
long.
scratch. I'm sorry.
Needed
It built from the scratch. Nobody buys it. Everybody knows the reality.
So on the same thread of science, what steps should our federal government be taking to address climate change right now? And Mr. Sangari, if you could go first, please.
Look, science has been on both sides, right? It has said it's a human created, and they've said that it's part of the landscape of our planet. So it probably is a combination of two. Whatever it is, I think the United States has always taken a lead on trying to address it as best as they can. And that's it. Like, these things are not complicated issues, whether it be healthcare, whether it be climate change. We make them complicated because politicians like to make them complicated to divide and have people fight over each other. These are simple issues. We got plenty of restrictions currently to be able to help these realities on the ground that we are trying to address. There's many options out there. Technology has made it even easier for us. Is whether or not the rest of the planet wants to do what America is doing. If the rest of the planet doesn't want to do it, okay, good luck trying to affect climate change. Remember, there's 7 billion people on this planet, only 300 million plus Americans. The rest of them may tell you, I don't care what your viewpoint is, I'm not listening to you. Okay, they have a voice in it too. And it's not that you struck some kind of a global deal with them in order to be able to satisfy the top 20% economically for you to say that I'm doing something about it. It's a matter of fact of how is it affecting the individuals on the ground, to include me, my family, and other constituents in my district. So that's the reality of it.
On the global note that you mentioned, should the U.S. have withdrawn from the Paris Accords?
Of course, it was a disaster. It wasn't going to fix anything. Go take a look at it. Look where we are today because we pulled out of it. Initially, the congresswoman even mentioned the Iran deal. Iran deal was a disaster. Take it from an Iranian, a Syrian, okay, that was born there. Okay, and I got to tell you, it was an economic deal, period. A lot of money that got sent to Iran in dollars. The reason why you send cash, because you can launder cash easily. Guess what? A lot of them made it back down here again. It made it through institutions in the U.S. And I have to tell you, a lot of individuals that are currently sitting in Congress probably was able to make some money off of those contract deals too. So yes, it is a disaster when it's only tied to individuals trying to make dollars for themselves. So my recommendation is, and this is coming from an individual who's with the AML of Chicago, anti-money laundering. I know exactly how money works, and I did a presentation on it specifically. And today, the banks that we have in Chicago probably have that slide presentation with my name and picture on it, saying how money gets laundered through these type of contracts for the powerful and the few.
But how do you address climate change? How would you address? You've said how you won't address it. How would you address it?
I would adjust it based on what the science is saying. Again, we got to go, the science has to be able to tell you how you could fix something. I'm a military guy. So if you want me to tell you how to take a hill, I could tell you that. You bring the scientists, take a look at the scientists specifically on both sides, because we have some that says only human events, the other one saying that it no is regular, and see what we can do through the process. And I think we are addressing this. We have been addressing it. The United States has been always advancing in technology, bring carbon emissions down. Maybe we haven't been doing it at the level that some people think that we have to do it, but we have. And we've taken new steps with new technologies all the time. Entrepreneurship in this country has advanced to create these type of realities for us. And that is the best way to be able to, through a free market process, to allow new existing sciences to be used out there. Take a look at some simple studies that were done even in Africa on how you could actually increase the capability of trying to limit captures of carbons by actually growing areas that were initially the Sahel, which have now become very lush areas of greenery. And if you take a look at exactly what is coming out of those particular scientific studies, you could actually go back with how you're living current lifestyle to even pre-1900s as far as carbon captures are concerned. So there's everybody, the answers are there. It's a matter of trying to get the congressional personnel to be able to write the laws and the bills to allow those particular studies also come to fruition. But when you have a small group of individuals who control the congressional people that put money in their pockets, it becomes very difficult for those sciences that have proven over time to work to capture climate or carbon emissions to be able to make it to the table.
Representative Schakowsky, on climate change and also on the comment that it's driven by money.
I think the problem of climate change is existential. It is the question whether or not human life will be able to survive on this planet. It is not the future, it is the present. We are watching those horrible fires in California. We are seeing devastating natural disasters of hurricanes and all kinds of climate issues that are right now devastating communities around this world and certainly in our own country. We can watch it. The House of Representatives passed a bill that says we should rejoin the Paris Accord on climate change. And I know that Vice President Biden has committed to doing that should we win the White House and win the Congress. President Trump calls it a hoax. He still believes that what we need to do is to develop the fossil fuels that are absolutely poisoning our planet. And though we are only 350 million people, once again, we represent a disproportionate share of the of the pollutants that go into the air, the carbon emissions that are challenging life on this planet and life as we know it. We saw temperatures of 120 degrees in the United States of America, in the West. This is not sustainable. People can't live in those that's deadly in those kinds of temperatures. If we don't get a grip on climate within the next few years, we could pass that turning point where there really is no coming back to stop the total ravages of climate change that do threaten life as we know it on this planet.
Thank you. I'd like to turn to a different topic once again, as our time is running short. And Representative Schakowsky, if you would go first on this one. I wonder, in your opinion, how deeply embedded is systemic racism, and how do we recognize, react to, and end discrimination based on race, gender, religion, or other superficial differences?
I think when Americans, and actually the rest of the world, saw the cold-blooded murder, watching every minute of it when George Floyd was killed, changed something here. Suddenly an understanding that this is something that actually has gone on for not only decades, but actually since the beginning of this country. The kind of racism that we are seeing in so many different ways. We know that the racial disparities of people who have died from the coronavirus. We certainly know, ask any African-American man, and plenty of women too, about the lecture they get from their parents about how to avoid being incarcerated or hurt or killed by the police. And we saw it after George Floyd. We saw it in the 9th Congressional District. Our young man who was shot 7 times in the back, yes, it was in Kenosha, Wisconsin, but he grew up and went to the junior high school right down the street from the house that I sit in right now. And we saw no reason for this young man to be shot and now paralyzed for life. I hope not. We'll see how that comes. It happens over and over and over again. We could name the names of all the people that have made the big news and then the thousands that have not. And so we need to address it. And I think the good news is that most Americans agree with that now, believe that it's true, that this kind of bias, and that's why we were able to pass a bill, Justice in Policing, that was never on the agenda at all, and suddenly appeared on the agenda because people understood it to be true, something that this country has not dealt with, that has plagued us for all this time, and now is visible to everyone. I really think technology has made the difference because now we see these videos of what is going on.
Would you describe what should change in policing?
Well, you know, we passed in that legislation, for example, no chokeholds. We passed body cams on the, would be necessary on the police. We deal somewhat with the training. We deal with making sure that police that engage in misconduct, that information is known nationally so that they can't just go to another police department and get another job and go on to continue the kind of abuse. We understand it not to be just a few bad cops, that there is something more systemic in the system that needs to be changed. And that's why we passed a comprehensive bill in the House of Representatives that mandated a lot of changes. The Senate passed a bill that was suggestive of things that ought to be done, that would be recommended, whereas the House of Representatives passed a bill that mandated changes in policing.
Thank you. Mr. Sangari, on that same topic, how deeply embedded is systemic racism? What should Congress in particular do, if anything, to remedy the situation? And also, if I could get your views on changes, if any, that need to be made in how we handle policing in this country.
Yeah, Congress should be representing the people and carrying out the will of the people, period. They're the ones who actually wrote the laws that the police are executing today. So for 22 years, if you're going to sit in Congress, pass legislation on the laws, and you're not going to blame yourself for what is happening on the ground, these people are not rioting in the streets because of Colonel Sangari. They're rioting because of you being in office for so many years. Systemic racism is alleviated all the time when all parties can come to a dialogue and talk to each other. Not one party saying my way is the right way. Everybody has to talk to each other. And it's usually alleviated in capitalistic societies when everybody has equal opportunities to be able to succeed. So in itself, you should be able to approach it that way, right? I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's your perspective, correct? I'm an immigrant who came to this country, couldn't speak a word of English. I fought 2 medical boards just to be able to go back into combat, to be able to represent my nation. Got blown up 7 times, came back. Right now I'm running for office. And the current congresswoman, if she believes everything she's talked about, then I accept your retirement and you should walk away and allow the new fresh voices of the American community to come to fruition and represent the 9th Congressional District with new perspectives, not the old perspectives and old ways that you cannot upgrade. That's software, which has led us to where we are today. However, you're not going to do that. If tomorrow the polls get any closer, this person of color immigrant is going to get crushed by your machine that keeps you in place. So is that systemic racism that is allowing her to stay where she is? Like I said, it's perspective of the people. I think that you have to approach everything with open dialogue from both sides. And that's the way we can progress forward. Listen to everyone, take in what they have, see what the issues are that we could do to change some of the basics and the laws, and we move forward. Policing today has changed because technology has changed. The problem is in policing today, you have young men coming to the police academy, and the only thing that that officer can do that is training them to allow them to survive in this battlefield where they are being attacked, they're being shot at, they're being ambushed, they're being burned, they're being thrown, have everything thrown on them. And on the other end, you have politicians that keep on always pouring fuel on the fire because remember, you get a divide to be able to stay in your political office seat, right? And unfortunately, most of them are fighting over that same chair that probably has made in China.
Change in how policing is conducted.
The way you change policing is you bring all the police to the table. You bring over the every single police department. You bring all the rank and file. You sit down and you talk to the experts who have to do the policing. You see what are the issues they're dealing with. Then you look at the technology so you could help them. Policing, wherever you use a weapon or you ever use a type of a system, is always based on terrain and the situation. And if you could apply it to a way where we could make it as easy as possible for that police force to execute the laws that the current congresswoman has put on the books, then I think that we can get to a best place situation where everybody's protected. Now, as far as you said that I have Black parents that are teaching their kids what they have to do, how not to be able to get in a position where a police would do something wrong against them. I do the same thing to my kids. I say, obey the laws. Don't put yourself in a position where you could put yourself in a bad situation where a police has to come in and apply force to alleviate that issue. Same thing applies across the board. So we're gonna be able to get in and we're gonna be able to look at the standards. The POTUS put an executive order out there. That's a start. That's not the finish. And we have to start looking at the legislation and laws to where we can be a much more capable policing force that is able to execute their mission with less lethality possibly on the ground.
On a related topic, and if you could continue on with this, what specifically is your position on gun ownership? What type of weapons and in what ways should we reduce gun violence?
Gun violence is reduced when somebody doesn't pick up a gun and shoot somebody else. But I cannot teach that to somebody. I cannot teach someone, do not take a gun and go commit a crime. How about enforcing the laws on the books? If you use a gun and committing a crime, you go to jail. How about enforcing that? If you use a gun in the process of committing a crime and somebody dies, you go to jail for a long time. How about enforcing that?
Should there be any changes?
You'll be in a good place.
Should there be any changes in the type of weapons that people can possess or in laws regarding ownership of guns?
No, because I've been in the Army for so many years. I've had multiple weapons, okay? The weapon does not, that piece of tool is not a weapon until I pick it up, I aim at somebody, I pull the trigger, and actually a round comes out of it. Then it becomes a weapon. So the fact that somebody goes through the actual process of picking up something, aiming it at somebody, squeezing a trigger, having a round come out of it, that's a personal choice that that individual has made. Usually the reason why sometimes they get shot by law enforcement. Or same thing, if you pick up a tool and try to use it to hurt somebody, there's gonna be consequences to it. So it's not the item that you have, it is the fact that you decide to use that item in committing a crime. And if you commit a crime, you should go to jail.
Representative Schakowsky.
We need national legislation to prevent automatic weapons from being in the hands of anyone. There is no reason why weapons of war should be available to people who are not engaged in war. I'm talking about international wars. We should absolutely have a ban on automatic weapons, which we actually did during the Clinton administration. There was a ban and it expired and it was never reinstated. We could begin with something as simple as universal background checks. And because of the Republicans, we have been unable to pass that legislation, which actually is supported by some 90% of Americans, including gun owners and including NRA members, to say that there should be universal background checks. So here in the Chicago area and Illinois, we have pretty strong laws about regulating the use of guns. But you can go across the border any weekend to a gun show in Indiana, for example, open up your trunk, buy the guns that you want, put them in the trunk and drive back across the border, sell them, give them away, whatever you're going to use them. And so that is why we absolutely have to have national
Congresswoman, that's illegal.
legislation.
They can't do that.
Excuse me.
Congresswoman, is illegal. They can't do that. And there is bans against automatic weapons, okay? I mean, you have to know the laws. You're in Congress. How do you not know the laws in Congress? You've been there 22 years, Congresswoman. You should have prepared at least before you came to this debate. This is what frustrates individuals like me. You're representing me, Congresswoman, okay? I'm technically your employer. You're my employee. How do you not know what the laws on the books are? I can sit here and say that you could, if somebody takes a gun from Illinois and sells it on the street,
refrain
in the
from
back of their car, they go to jail. Absolutely amazing. It's frustrating It is very frustrating for the individual in your district.
And-
You're representing us. At least represent us with some pride. Have some understanding of what you're saying.
I
22
that we
years.
not engage in personal attacks here.
Thank you.
Have some notes next time. Amazing.
Representative Schakowsky? Did you want to continue?
No, I think it just is common sense. I think that many of our communities are being ravaged. We see these mass shootings that repeat over and over and over again. It is time for that to stop. You know, the shooter in Wisconsin was 17 years old. A white nationalist who just went and shot 2 people to death. This was in the wake of Jacob Blake, who was walking toward his car where his 3 children were in it. And a police officer used that gun. We have to, I think, even limit the amount of weapons that the police carry at times for certain calls. They shouldn't have to have even some of these deadly weapons with them, but certainly these military type weapons should not be legal in the United States of America, period.
I do have one more topic I'd like to introduce, and then we're coming to the end of our hour here. Mr. Sangari, I want to start with you on this. Are you happy with how voting is being conducted in this election?
You know, you got your vote. It's up to you. You want to go in and vote? Go in and vote. You want to mail in your vote? Mail in your vote. I've been in the military. I've requested mail-in ballots before. And I can tell you that me and my wife, going back to 2 elections prior, sending our ballots, mine was accepted, hers got kicked back on the same date, at the same time we filled them out. So it's up to the individual. I'm hoping that we do what we have to do to ensure that every vote counts. The beauty of our nation is that my vote counts the same as the president's vote. It is up to the individuals. I'm hoping that October 16th, people go in and vote. And finally, we have a change in the 9th Congressional District. The incumbency makes it difficult. It's hard for somebody to get their finger from here to here. This is as far as they have to move it to vote the incumbent out. But when you're entrenched for 20 years, you have a lot of money in your coffers. And you could sit and make comments that are actually proven non-factual. The machine will still try to place you in Congress. So as far as voting is concerned, I hope we have term limits. I hope we have them, that they finally submit term limits for themselves so that we have new perspectives. This country needs to heal. It cannot heal if you had people who sat in Congress 40 years ago saying it was President Reagan's fault for where we are economically, and today saying President Trump, or vice versa from the Republican side. So yeah, I think that voting is going to work out well. I have confidence in the individuals, that they're all professionals, but we also do know that incumbency, when it wants to stay in power, it will use any means to its disposal to stay in their seat. Unfortunately, it's a Chinese-made seat that says made in China.
But you said you do have confidence in the way voting is being conducted, if I understand correctly.
Yes, I have confidence in how voting is being conducted. I have told my folks, go in and vote. Majority of the Republicans are going to go in and vote. An election cycle ago, I went in to vote and my electronic ballot was not working. I had to actually fill out a non-electronic ballot to submit, but it is what it is. These are the issues that you kind of deal with. I think that we should give everybody an opportunity to go in and vote. And I highly encourage them to walk in from October 16 and vote their conscience.
Thank you. And Representative Schakowsky?
We know that even as we speak, that the Russians are trying to interfere with this election. again, the President of the United States says, even when his intelligence community has said it over and over again about the 2016 election and now about the 2020 election, that, you know, why would Putin want to do that? And of course, it is happening, and that's something to worry about. In terms of the voting itself, the president also said he's against voting by mail because more people who vote by mail, he says, are Democrats, and so we don't want that to happen. I mean, he just said that. And they're going to do, the Trump people are doing everything they can to undermine the postal service, to make people not trust and have confidence in our wonderful postal service. But so my recommendation is for people who want to, because they don't want to get in line and they don't want to be outside and they are not healthy, that they vote by mail, but vote early as soon as they can to cast that mail ballot. Because I believe that the Trump people are going to do everything they can to try and undermine the accuracy of this election. But I also know that we are fighting back in every way. There are lawyers challenging restrictions on voting. Imagine trying to limit the number of people who will vote, particularly people that Donald Trump doesn't like. And so I do have confidence in the election to certainly encourage everyone to vote. This is a turnout election. It will be determined by who actually gets to show up at the polls and making sure that those ballots are accurately counted.
Thank you. Do any members of the editorial board or Steve have any more questions? Okay, then that concludes today's interview. Thank you, Representative Schakowsky and Mr. Sangari, for participating, and good luck as we move toward the election. Early voting, begins September 24th, and that will include mail-in voting. We encourage all voters to research the candidates and issues and to make use of Daily Herald and dailyherald.com as part of your research. Thank you very much for participating, and thank you very much for watching.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good luck.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too. Let's see, I'm trying to leave. How do you leave?